Alright, so a few days ago I was live streaming here on YouTube and someone hopped in my chat and asked me if I could recreate the social promo that Dr. Lupo uses on his stream. This right here. So I started tinkering around a bit in the Fusion page and yeah, I made this. Let me show you how I did it. First, let's look at what we actually have here. We have the main name and then we have the social icons, and as the name is rotating back, these icons are rotating forward, and you really get the sense that this is all on some 3D tube. You see, especially on the edges, it sort of bulges out as it reaches the center and then retreats back like it's rolling forward or rolling back. And yes, that is mechanically what is going to happen. So let's get started. You want to make sure your effects library is open, go to effects, and we are going to drag a Fusion composition right to our timeline. And we are going to select that, click Ctrl D, and change this duration from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. And then with your playhead over that, you can click this button to open the Fusion page. All right, and as normal, we have this one media out node. Whatever we build on this page, we'll plug into that and it will send it back to the edit page. So we're going to start with our main text. I'm going to create a simple text plus node, and I'm just gonna type Loopy. We can pull that up on preview 1 or 2, and here you see this. And then what we are going to do is we are going to scale this up fairly large and just position this right at the top of our screen there. And we can zoom in to make sure nothing is actually getting cut off. That is great. I am zooming in here by holding the middle mouse button and the left mouse button and then dragging to zoom in or out. So coming out of this text, we are going to click Shift Space to pull up this select tool search bar, and we are going to type in duplicate, click enter to automatically add that, and change our preview by pressing 2 on that one over as well. Right now nothing is happening, but we're going to change this copies to 4, and then on the center parameter here we're going to go to Y and pull this down, and there you can see 4 different copies. And what we are trying to do is we are going to try to evenly space these out, but we want the space at the bottom to match the space in between any of these in the middle, because this will end up looping back to the top of the screen. So I'm going to pull this down, and really the specific length will also matter on how large your text is. So I might keep it right about that and see how that feels later. But coming out of this duplicate, we're going to click that and then click this icon over here to create an image plane 3D node. And if we preview that, you'll see what's happening is that it took that image of those 4 lines of text and it pasted it on a 3D plane. So now we can move around this 3D workstation and we see exactly that. Now, this is really exciting because coming out of this node, we're going to pull up that search bar and we're going to type Bender, and that will be a Bender 3D. We'll click add, and then we have some really interesting controls. Luckily, this axis control is already the one we want. So after we make sure we are previewing that Bender, if we pull down this amount, you'll start to see that this text is actually starting to curve back and sort of form this shape that we know we want it going for. We'll pull it back, and we're actually going to pull it all the way back down to -1, and you'll see that now this text is perfectly wrapped all the way around. But you'll also see that it is pretty jagged. You can really clearly see the individual planes. So to smooth that out, we're going to go back to our image plane and then pull up this subdivision, and there you'll see that really circle out well. And maybe something about right around 20 or 25, that range will work. I'll go 24, 25. And now we can see, yeah, now that looks much smoother. But you'll also notice something funky. We see the back faces of all this text as it curves away from us. So if we were to just use this, it would be really hard to see because you would see the text behind it as well. And for that, we're going to go back to our image plane 3D. In the controls, we are going to open up visibility, and we're going to come down to cull faces and check back. And now that works exactly like we want it. It feels like that text in the back disappeared, but if we go around, you'll see as long as we were looking at the front face, we can see it, but we can't see the back face of that text, which is exactly what we want. Now for our main animation. What we're going to do first is actually very quickly turn off that back cull and rotate our camera around. I'm rotating this way by holding middle mouse button and right mouse button. And we're going to come around just to the side. And then coming out of the Bender, we are going to add a merge 3D. And we're just doing this to get further control of this transform point here. I'm going to go to transform, and I'm going to come down to pivot, and we're going to pull down this Z pivot, and we're going to slide this back until it is sitting right in the middle of this circle. And you have a little leeway, but as close as you can get is great. I'll go back to the image plane, cull the back faces, and now on this merge 3D node, this transform, we're going to be rotating. We're going to be rotating here on the x-axis. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the very beginning of our timeline. I'm going to drag here. I'm going to shift this here until I get this first line of text right centered where I think it looks pretty good. I'm going to set a keyframe there, and then I'm going to come to the end, and I'm going to type in here, just to make sure I nail my perfect complete rotation. I'm just going to add plus 360 on the end of whatever number that is. And now with that keyframe set, you'll see that over this time, it'll rotate down, and it'll rotate through 4 different copies, all 4 of those, and then gets back to that starting position. So then if you play from the end, it loops back from the beginning and will loop flawlessly. But to get this usable, we have to complete out the rest of the 3D scene. So coming out of this merge, remember this has our scene transform, so we have to actually create another 3D merge. Then coming into this one, we will have our camera, we'll go out to a renderer 3D, and the renderer 3D will connect to our media out. And then we can preview that second merge, and you see your camera in there as well. With that camera selected, I'm going to pull down the focal length. This will achieve something very important. If we pull down the focal length, that will progressively turn this into a fisheye lens, and then we will move the camera really close to our subject, so you'll get that natural distortion that we saw earlier. So I'm gonna bring this down maybe to, we'll start at 14 millimeters, see how that does, and then I'm actually going to preview that out here and the merge in my first viewer so I can see the output as I start working. And with the camera selected, I'm going to pull back on this control here to move it in Z space, and then you'll see that text come in. And depending on how far back we put it, it'll get more or less distorted. And I'm actually going to pop up this focal length to 16 millimeter, pull back a bit, remembering that we will also be putting on icons here. So I might even shift over a little bit in anticipation of that. But that looks pretty good. That's a pretty good like bulge out on the side in what would normally be a straight face there. And if we hop back to the edit page and let this cache, you'll see that it is definitely having the intended effect. This text comes up over the front and then rotates forward until it disappears again, and it loops pretty flawlessly as well. Occasionally you can still see the jagged edges, especially on the L, that come from that lower resolution on that image plane. You could always crank that up if you want all of this to be a little bit cleaner. But I'm gonna hop back into the Fusion page, and we're gonna start talking about those social icons. Now the process for the social icons will be very similar, but we need to talk very quickly about the icons themselves. If you have files for these icons, amazing. You can drop them right in the Fusion page, position them vertically, and send them all to one image onto your image plane and be done. But if you don't have these icons readily available, I'm gonna walk you through how to very quickly break down one of my past presets to get those icons and modify them so they look great here. And that preset is my master socials promo. This is one that has done pretty well. I've seen lots of people love it, lots of people use it. It's very exciting. I've also promised an update of this soon, and that is definitely coming. I don't have any news right now, but definitely stick around if you want more info on that later. But if you've already grabbed this preset and you want to access it on the Fusion page, in the effects library, you have this edit templates drop down. Then you can go to titles, scroll down, and you will get to SST master socials. You can drag that right into the Fusion page and it will come in as this stacked nodes. So I'm going to give us some room to work, pull it over here, and double click to open that up. And here you'll see all the nodes that made that social pop up. But for us, we are interested in this row of nodes down here, and we can select any of them and preview them. And you'll see that here we have the Facebook logo, Instagram, Twitch, Twitter, and TikTok. So we are going to grab these 4. We're not going to grab Facebook, but I'm going to select all of those, copy, and just paste them outside of this effect as well. And then we can select that entire macro and then just delete that. And real quickly, just to get our effect built out, I'm going to position these And coming out of this first Instagram logo, I'm going to make a transform node, and then I will just bring down this size, drag it up to where it feels good. Remember, we've got to get 4 of these in there, maybe something like that. And then I will copy that transform, paste it in our second one, where it's Twitch, where I'm going to pull it down a bit, and then repeat for Twitter, down a bit. I'm gonna clean this up so it doesn't need to be super precise now. Then TikTok, down a bit to the bottom. And then we're gonna connect all of these with merges. I'm doing this just by taking the output, dragging it right to the output of the one underneath. Then if I pull up that final one, you'll see where we're working with. And we don't have a lot of space to work here. So real quickly, I'm just going to come down, pull down this size a little bit more, copy that parameter and paste that into these different transform nodes. Nice. And then I can go to each one of these transforms and just position this so they are pretty evenly spaced. And then coming out of that, I am actually going to copy this image plane through the merge, copy that all, paste it down here, pipe that merge into our image plane, go to this final merge, pull that up in the preview, and now you'll see we have the exact same rig we created before, but with these social icons now. And we even pulled over that keyframe, so now this will slide through. But remember, we wanted these to move in the opposite motion. So what I'm actually gonna do is come into this merge, go to the end, hop over to transform, and remember this we originally had as our original parameter plus 360. So I'm actually gonna take this and go to minus 720, because remember we're going back to normal, and then another 360, minus 720, and then if we go to the beginning of our timeline, we'll see instead this is rotating back. And then we can pipe this into that second merge as well, preview that, and then we just need to pull this merge over to the side. And now if we preview our media out, you'll see this is what we have. As our text rotates forward, these social icons rotate back. If you want a version of this with these full color logos, you can absolutely run with this. But real quick, I'm going to take a little bit of time to turn these into real clean black and white versions. And for that, we will need to go into how each of these logos were made. We'll be quick, and then we will circle back to talk about exporting. But here we see we have our effect. It looks pretty nice. But if I hop back into the Fusion page, if I wanted these social logos to be black and white, the first thing we would do is drag a box around all of these. Coming out of our final merge, we could add a color corrector node and just pull down this saturation, and they are a version of black and white. But with all of these bright colors, they don't look great in a grayscale. So what we are going to do, we are going to go back, open up all of these different logos and figure out how to just use the outline. I'm going to start with this Instagram logo. I'm going to double click this, open it up, and look around and see what we have. You'll see we have 3 main background nodes that contain masking. And luckily we can just use this first background node here. I'm going to pull up our merge in the second viewer so we know what the logo still needs to look like. But here's what we're going to do. We are going to go to this first rectangle mask, and we're going to uncheck solid. So here, if we're previewing that, we see it as just this outline. And then what we're actually going to do is we're going to select these 3 nodes underneath it, delete those, and we're going to copy these 3 nodes that were coming into this second version, come back to this rectangle, paste those, and then we can drag them over. If we hold shift, we can add them to this chain here. We could accomplish this same thing by fiddling with the nodes that were already here, but this will be faster. Then if we preview that background, and then we need to come into these rectangle, change these from subtract to add, and they will be the appropriate thickness for what we are looking for. And now this is the main logo we're going for. So then we don't need to mess with this second batch at all. We don't need to mess with that. And while we can delete this merge node here, we need to keep this one if we want to come out of this same group. You could copy and paste this outside, but I like the way this group functions. So for this, I'm just gonna click Control T, which will shift around these inputs. And then now if we pull up that transform, we'll see now that we have a plain white version here, except for this one is a little darker, and that will be because on this rectangle, that is the level is just down a bit. That probably got bumped when I was making it the first time. Back up to 1, and boom, we have an Instagram logo. And this is the process we're going to use on these other logos. I'm going to fly through them now. If you need more information, just ask. I might do a quick follow-up on working with masks. I also have some other videos on the topic, but in short, I'm just going to go one by one and adjust all of these by looking at their masks. And as needed, we're going to preview these individual masks to find the shapes we want. Each one will be a little different, but that is okay. You'll see I'm unchecking the solid on the outline, bringing it back here, and from here on we are mostly changing these add and subtract based on how I use them in the original one, and then deleting any superfluous thing. This is an interesting example because this is purple. Once it goes into black and white, this will be naturally a much darker shade. So on all these background nodes as well, bring all of these up so that they are pure white and they will all look great. Cool. 2 down, let's grab the next one. Open that up. This is our Twitter logo. I'm going to look at these nodes, see which one I like. And on this one, you can see if I preview this rectangle, you'll see this shape has this bird cutout that we want. I'm going to come into this polygon, change this from subtract to add. And on this rectangle, I'm going to uncheck solid. And before I mess with this one, I'm actually going to pull down level a bit. And we want to recreate this border line. So I'm actually going to pull up width so that is about halfway from what it was. Height about the same, and then I'm going to pull this level back up and turn up border width until it reaches that original border, and then on background change this to our solid white again. We don't need this second background. I'll change this merge, and on rectangle we need to uncheck solid as well. Boom, we've got a Twitter logo. And last one is this TikTok logo. This one is interesting because I learned a lot the first time I did this of how I built it and how I could make some things a little easier. First thing, luckily you can delete this confusing stuff here, delete that right out. And then what we are going to do, we're going to take this background node, come into the mask, uncheck solid, hold down border width just a hair, maybe increase that height and width like we did earlier. And then you can see this black background. Obviously that is what we want to get rid of. And then what we're going to do, we're going to keep these two colored outlines, but we're actually going to copy those masks, paste them here in the blank space, connect them to one another. And then when we delete this last mask that is going on just this white background here, we're going to take the final mask of the ones we copied into that background mask. And if I preview that, you'll see what we want. We want to recreate that white core. So I'm actually going to come into this second polygon node, and we're going to change this from subtract to minimum. Here you'll see this is only showing what overlaps in the middle. So if I pull up this final merge and hold Control T to change those inputs, it overlaps that white right in the middle when we have that final look we want. Now this TikTok node is interesting because we are keeping this color. So after that shifts to black and white, we still have this little edge, but I think that's fine. And now if we go into our final effect, see we have our text. We have our nice clean black and white logos here. And over time, you see this Instagram, that's still a little thick. Maybe I want to bump that down. And the merge, pull that border width down. You could spend some time making these as uniform as you want or as different as you want. But if we hop back to the edit page, let this cache, then you have your effect. You have this nice, natural, subtle 3D look as it bulges a little forward and the text rotates forward, the logos rotate back, advertising to everyone watching your stream where they can find you. But now let's talk about exporting. This is a pretty unique situation because you'll want this to be a very small part of your total design. So I'm going to head over to my render page here, and under custom, the first thing I'm going to do is change this codec from H.264 to GoPro Cineform. And then if I change type to 16-bit, I can check this box to export alpha. I am going to be exporting this as this GoPro Cineform because this is only a 10-second loop and it will end up being a very low resolution as well. Ideally, you could go on to convert this into a webam so it would be even less taxing on your system, but for what will end up being such a low resolution small file, for now, I'm going to run with this. This is one of the options that allows you to export with an alpha channel, export with transparency. And on this resolution, I'm going to come down to custom, and I'm going to set this resolution to 256 by 144. Then you can just choose a proper place to export this, give it a custom name, click add to render queue, and click render. And finally, if you want to bring this into OBS, then you could just pull up wherever you saved your video to in your browser. And if you drag that video right down here into your sources, you'll see it automatically pop in a nice lower resolution. You might even want to scale it down depending on where you want it in screen. And if you right click on that, go to properties, you can click this button to loop. And in OBS, you also have this little viewer here. So if you hop to the end, you'll see that this will also loop pretty flawlessly once it gets back to TikTok. You can position this anywhere you want in your scene. It works really well for Dr. Lupo right above his camera, but it's up to you. This was a super cool project, and I never would have pieced it together or even started working on it if it wasn't for that one person that hopped into my live stream and brought it up. I'm finding live streams to be really valuable, and I think they're a great place to answer questions on the fly or develop new ideas together with my community. If you don't want to miss out on a live stream, a great way is to click that notification bell. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.